Welcome to the biggest influences. This is the real Joe Rogan.
Is there any headway that's being made on bringing Ibogaine to the United States? Because you think about the opiate crisis that we have here, that seems like one of the very best sort of remedies for that.
It is, and this is where, if you were to look back over the last 50 years, I doubt that there's more than 5 cases that the government has about anybody abusing Ibogaine. If at all.
Well, it's a 24-hour drug, right?
I've
never done it, but
it knocks you down. I would highly recommend it.
Yeah,
but I would I've had I'd say one of the most important experiences of my whole life was Ibogaine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What happened?
Well, so there's a fellow named Leo Zeff who is we called him the secret chief. So he was the leader of the underground psychedelic therapy movement, and he worked closely with Sasha Shulgin. And Sasha Shulgin was the chemist that invented hundreds of psychedelics. He worked for Dow in the 60s, and he invented a biodegradable insecticide. And they rewarded him with his own lab to do whatever he wanted. And so Sasha tried to do more psychedelics, and they're like, well, maybe these are not going to lead to products. So he realized he had to leave, and he set up a lab at home, and he taught. But they would have this process of inventing new drugs, new psychedelic drugs, looking for new therapy drugs. And they would then, Sasha would take it into himself, and then if he thought it was okay, he would give it to his wife, Anne. They're now both... And they would do these together, and then they had a group of 12 people that would meet like once a month, and they would try these new drugs. Sasha, by the way, did go to the Bohemian Grove, where he was a musician there, and so he was able to go, but he would test new drugs with people at Bohemian Grove.
Oh, my God. So like presidents and bankers?
Different kinds of people like that, yes. They would try these new things. They'd go for walks in the woods, because you go to Bohemian Grove for a week or two, and so it's not like you're there for a day or so. But so... This small group of 12 people decided that MDMA had incredible potential. This is in the middle 70s. And they gave this to Leo Zeff, and Leo said, wow. He was about to retire. He was a clinical psych PhD, and he was getting up there in years, and he was about to retire. He trained a lot of people with LSD and other things. And so he did not retire in order to bring forth MDMA. And so... he really pioneered the use of therapeutic use of MDMA. And this is now MDMA being a therapy drug before it became ecstasy as a party drug. And that a lot happened in Dallas at the Stark Club, which is, a public place where, incredible stories of the Stark Club. There's going to be a documentary by Michael Caine is working on a documentary about the Stark Club. But that attracted Lloyd Benson, the senator from Texas. He heard about this, and then he complained to the DEA, and then the DEA moved to criminalize. We knew that this public use of MDMA was going to eventually result in DEA crackdown. This is Nancy Reagan and Ronald Reagan and all of that. And so we had a jump start in a sense that the DEA didn't know we were there. They only knew the party drug. They didn't know the therapy parts. But we knew that the DEA was there, and they were coming after us. So I started a nonprofit before MAPS in '84, and that was to prepare and gather this community together in order to defend MDMA once the DEA moved. And so Leo Zeff came to me, and he said, you're starting to be an advocate, and I'd like to offer you an Ibogaine experience, because we need to own our own shadow, own our own weaknesses, own our own things that we're not comfortable with, and also have spiritual connections and things like that. And he said, if I can help you, this might help in your political work, because then you'll see that we're mixtures of good and bad. Everybody is, and that you won't demonize the DEA, and that you may be able to find a way to build a bridge. And so he offered me this Ibogaine experience. And I said, great, I would love to do this. And so we had this whole long day to set aside to do this. And Ibogaine in plant form takes a while to take an effect. So Leo said, I'd like to give you a bunch of LSD at the same time. It was 350 micrograms of LSD, which is a pretty hefty dose. The first LSD experience that we know of, Albert Hofmann, April 19th, 1943, was an amount that he thought would have no real effect because it would be so small, 250 micrograms, which is a major existential challenge. So 350 micrograms is pretty good as well. And so I actually got administered Ibogaine, a bunch of it in plant form, and then also the LSD at the same time. And I could tell the differences between the drugs. I could tell coming up on the LSD and moving towards this kind of ego dissolution and opening up and different my emotions and how am I going to do this political work and who am I and am I qualified and all of this. And I sort of had a lot of experience with LSD. I'd never done Ibogaine before, and I was able to open up pretty well for the LSD. But then this sort of low guttural rumble started from the Ibogaine. The LSD peaks around 3 hours or so. And I could feel this Ibogaine building and building and building. LSD is also very much in your head, very ethereal, more so than psilocybin mushrooms, which are more embodied. And so this Ibogaine started coming up, this experience, and I started feeling like if I could just let go, if I could just fully have this experience, and if I didn't have these fears and anxieties, then I would be a better advocate, and that I needed to, and so much was at stake. But then I felt I couldn't let go because I was too scared, and then I would be hating myself. So I felt that there was this cycle of, I'm not as good as I should be. I wish I could let go. I do have these emotions of fear. And then I would feel that and get nauseous, and then I would vomit. And then I would feel relief for like a minute or so. And then the swirl would begin, and each of them is like 15 or 20-minute cycles and stuff. And then I would get to this peak, and then I would vomit again, and over and over and over. And for a Jewish person, the imagery that I had was that I was being crucified on the cross of self-perfectionism, that I didn't want to be human in a way. I wanted to be perfect. I wanted to be more than I was, and that this idea that I was not perfect, that it just was this connection between self-criticism and self-hatred. And I could see that, and it just made me sick, and I wished I could do more, but I couldn't get out of it. And I had like a 12-hour cycle of that, over and over and over. I mean, I was like dry heaving. I had nothing left to throw up anymore. And I just so saw this connection between wanting to be perfect, not wanting to be human, being super self-critical, leading to self-hatred, and shutting myself down. And so at the end of that day, I was so exhausted. I called it transcendence through exhaustion. I just gave up. And I just beat myself up so much. I just gave up, and I had the most blissful night. It was so beautiful. It was like no struggle, completely open, everything. And I realized that what I needed to do was keep the self-criticism, because that is the drive for quality. You need access to the self-critical part of your mind.
Yeah.
But if it's connected to self-hatred, you don't listen as much, because then you're a bad person.
Right.
So I sort of severed the connection between self-criticism and self-hatred. I accepted myself as a flawed human being that had a lot of room to grow, and that I made friends in a way. I made an ally out of this self-critical part of my brain. And it, I think, has helped me to learn and grow, because we're doing things that I've never done before. We're doing things I've never done before, nobody's never done before, bringing this through the FDA, psychedelic psychotherapy. And we've constantly making mistakes. I like to say that I'm just a fuck-up who just keeps on trying. And so this... And then, but I told myself this story. This was the most beautiful night. All night I was just super alert, didn't sleep at all, and just saw the stars. But I told myself a story, and so much is governed by stories, as you know. But the story was that I was telling myself is that I had not earned this. I hadn't had a breakthrough. I just exhausted myself. So I said, when the sun comes up, I'll be back stuck in this nauseous space. I don't know why I told myself that story, but I did. And the sun comes up, and then I was like stuck and nauseous again, and I couldn't move for a day. I actually had to sit there or lie there really in a fetal position. A friend was supposed to come pick me up. I said, I can't move.
Do you think you brought that on yourself?
In a way, I do. I think the stories we tell ourselves. I mean that's sort of PTSD or depression.
Yeah.
The story, and that's what we're saying about you get in these grooves, and that's where the psychedelics can shake things up, and the neuroplasticity is what really permits you to see it in a different way. So I spent the whole next day just curled in a puddle, basically. Occasionally they'd bring me a banana to eat or something like that. And then by the third day, finally, I was able to stand up without being nauseous, and a friend came and picked me up and ended up driving me away. And as we were driving, I'd only been there once. This was at a house I'd never been to before, and we were going back to where familiar ground in the same way. And I had this sense in my mind that I knew what was around the corner. And I would say, oh, I think we're going to see this. And a couple times we did. And so what I think happened is that I was taking it in peripherally, but I wasn't paying attention to it when I was going there. It wasn't like I was, telepathic in a way or anything like that. It was just that all these experiences had sort of been there but hadn't registered. And I think I cleared out a lot of space in my mind from this constant self-criticism. So I had a more openness in the space, and I could remember things. It was the fourth day that I could finally drive, but I felt that ever since then I've had this increasing ability to be self-critical without it being so connected to self-hatred and so painful. And I really feel that ibogaine experience, although I've not done it since because it was pretty heavy and exhausting and painful, and I've had other psychedelic experiences since, but that I think was one of the pivotal ones of my mind. And so here we have an opiate epidemic. Over 100,000 people died last year with overdoses connected sometimes with fentanyl and others. And a tool that can be tremendously helpful is something that is not being studied at all in the United States, and we're forcing people to go to other countries. So MAPS is developing what's called an investigator brochure. And what that means is that any time a pharmaceutical company wants to develop a drug through the FDA, you have to summarize the world's literature in the peer-reviewed journals. And you look at it from a safety and efficacy perspective. And so we prepare this brochure for the FDA, and it will bring us to what is the latest science. It'll include the study that ICEERS is doing in Spain with ibogaine for helping people withdraw from methadone, or the studies in Mexico also for opiate addiction. And then we will propose a new study. And ibogaine is in some ways one of the most dangerous of the psychedelics, in that there are a small group of people that can have problems with the heart. And so some people have died from taking ibogaine. But if you do it under medical supervision, particularly for people who are in weaker physical states because of drug addiction, that nobody needs to die, and you can reverse it if something does happen. So we're probably going to propose, and we're working with Joe Barsuglia and Martin Polanco, who have developed a company to try to make ibogaine into a medicine. And they ran a lot of the clinics also in Mexico.
Subscribe to Biggest Influences today.